Hey, all right, we are here. It's Friday. It's the last word. We put a request in this week for Rob Chrisman, and we got 2 Rob Chrismans. So what a bonus for everybody today. Thank you all for tuning in to The Last Word, a Chrisman Commentary weekly show. Christy, KP, good to see you guys again. Rob and Robbie, welcome to the show. How's everybody?
Doing great. Loving it. Thank you. We're on with Rob and Robbie. It's always a treat. I'm going to try and see if I can make Rob blush. He deflects all compliments, but he is one of my idols and an absolute legend.
Do you mind if I spout off here a little bit?
Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
I think we take it for granted that I could be in Paraguay right now, or Hong Kong, or anywhere in the world. And Robbie, all of us could be anywhere. And I think we found out during the pandemic just how powerful the internet and modern communication devices are. And I always think back about my dad heading off into the Navy in 1942, and he saved a few of his letters from home, but there wasn't any cell phone, wasn't any Zoom, wasn't any of this stuff. And when you said goodbye to your family, you said goodbye. And now through all of this, we can be anywhere chatting with each other. It just continues to amaze me how neat this is.
So I love that thread. Let's stay on that thread for a minute, because I'm curious, Rob, you've been at this longer than us. I'm not picking on your age, by the way. I don't need any comments in the commentary here.
You finally get to with someone on this show.
Finally, somebody older than me. This is
no elder abuse, please. No elder abuse.
No, here's my question to you, Rob. You've been at this thing that we're doing here today. We happen to be doing a live video, but you were doing social before there were platforms other than email, right? If you think about your newsletter when it started, that was the kind of the flavor of social at the time. And clearly it helped you take your brand from Northern California and make it a national brand, right? It's part of that process. How much have you seen, like, how much has changed for you now when you go, because you travel every week somewhere? How much has it changed from people seeing you in writing to seeing you show up on video in different platforms when you show up at the Michigan Mortgage Bankers, conference, et cetera?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, it's primarily email. And I know Robbie's done a fantastic job of expanding into podcasts, webcasts. He's got a vendor marketplace that's rolling out shortly. He's much better at this than I am, even though I'm the one with the LinkedIn account. He does not have a LinkedIn account, but I'm not on Facebook or InstaChat or Facegram or whatever. So the fun thing is when, people will see me at a conference and I can see them, not that I'm any big celebrity, and I'm sure KP does the same thing, but you can see somebody out over there and they're kind of looking at you and you can see that what's going through their mind, and then they'll come up and they'll say, are you Rob Chrisman? And I'll inevitably say, no, I'm Kevin Peranio. And they'll say, oh, you're much better looking on video. So it's a little bit of a game we play, but yeah, it's nice to see people in person, but it's also it takes work to see people in person, but I think that it pays off. It's a people business, as you guys have talked about, as I continue to talk about, that it's nice seeing people in person. There's a reason we go to conferences. There's a reason we go to events. There's a reason why a loan officer will meet a borrower at a Starbucks or in their office. And so, yeah, I send out the commentary and people feel that they know me and they know Myrtle the cat, for example, and so on, and they feel that they can email me and insult me, or send me jokes or compliments, whatever they want to do, which is fine. But when it's in person, it's still different, and it's still, if I go to a conference and I say, hey, and Robbie does the capital market side of things, so you sign up. There's a reason they say there's a reason why Robbie goes to conferences. Christy and you, Brian. I mean, Brian, you go to a lot of conferences as well. It's nice sitting down with people.
For sure. And so that's a good segue into conference season, right? Spring conference season is up and running. KP, I know you were running around. You were at the Texas MBA this week. What's the word on the street at TMBA?
Well, they do a great job. I tell everyone they're one of the best state organizations. I mean, I think California, Texas, and New Jersey host some really good shows. And
Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan as well. And it's
Texas is one of the top 50, though.
Yes. Well, I think Christy is in Texas and runs things all mortgage for University Federal Credit Union. She probably can give a better snapshot of the TMBA than I can.
I was gonna say, I didn't get to see KP. Then the power of social media was that I was following him on his story, and he's at Globe Life Field. I'm like, hey, wait, I'm here. Are you here? And conferences are big places. You don't always get to see everybody, even if you know them well. So it was really cool to be able to make sure that we at least got a quick hug in while we were there. The sessions, I got to say, this was a really well done event. We heard from Glenn Stearns, who shared a little bit about his story. And, I love it when people get up and they share not just the good parts, but the struggles and the pieces that were hard. And while nothing is 100% relatable, it's really good to know that other people do have struggles, and here's how they overcame them. So that was a really good session. We had a great regulatory update, just talking about what's going on in Washington, what's going on at the Texas level. Because for those of you that don't know, Texas legislature only meets every 2 years, so every other year. But this is a legislative year, so a lot tries to happen during that particular period. There were a lot of other really good sessions. I took the time. A lot of times when we're at conferences, we're spending most of the time meeting with folks, which is a necessary thing. This time I took a lot of time and said, I'm not going to meet with folks during the sessions, and I'm going to go to every session that I absolutely can. So I made it to, I think, all but one or two of the sessions. And the sense of where people are is pretty optimistic, that they're figuring out how to deal with the volatility. They're figuring out how to deal with the margin compression. They're excited again to be in the business. It's reminding them why they're here, and that they're smart enough to figure out anything that the business throws their way.
Love that. Was there, I'm curious, was there a concentration of loan officers at the event? Do you know?
Now, this was, it's interesting. So having been involved in Georgia for so long and now being over in Texas for the last few years, because of the number of companies that are headquartered here, kind of like you have in California, you see more senior leadership at these events. Now, there are some events like the Texas women's event that Rihanna puts on, that she does such a great job, where they really try to reach out to the operations staff that are in the different markets that we're in and bringing those guys out. But you do tend to see a higher level of employee here in Texas. Whereas when I was in Georgia, we had a lot of loan officers and branch managers that were there. So the content's a little different. The sentiment's a little different.
Yeah, we did yesterday. We held here in Michigan a sales rally, very focused, 6-hour event, and the audience, the primary audience, were loan officers, and it was cool to see 100+ local loan officers in the room, learning, but then collaborating and masterminding and sharing kind of successes, but also to your point, some of the struggles. We were fortunate. We had Dustin Owen, who he has the Loan Officer podcast. He came and talked about his story on how kind of he created a brand around his podcast, and he's turned that into a business of coaching other loan officers. But he started his whole conversation started with what not to do, right? Here's the cheat code to skip the first 3 years of struggles. And that's what's cool to see at some of these events where we can learn some of the shortcuts, right? If it's a 5-step process, Dustin talked about this, he'll teach you the first 3. You're going to have to figure out number 4 and number 5 as you go, because everyone's, got a different kind of twist on things. But it was a good day here in Michigan with the local loan officers coming out in a pretty good way.
Yeah, he spoke at TMBA on panel with Dan Spikoska and Kyle Draper. And, what's interesting is you do have some sales leaders that attend these, especially on the mortgage banker side. So they're coming with high-level strategy from a panel like that to bring it back to their team of originators or even realtors. And so, I felt it really reinforced, having a disciplined approach to tactics in your business, branding, getting on social media, social selling, vendor partners, like Joe and Ben from Social Coach are there, at TMBA. And so you get high level strategy that a lot of sales leaders and executives take back to their teams of hundreds of loan officers around the country. And that's kind of, we have a wholesale channel and a correspondent channel. I talked to some of these, owners, and, mortgage banking in high level strategy is not something that they focus on, because a lot of them deal with lenders where they handle that for them, right? And so it's an interesting group, and I wish there was more loan officer centric stuff, but momentum builders out there. You and I have gone to tons of other ones back in the day for very loan officer centric stuff, and so they kind of have their own run of shows as well, which I go to those as well, because I'm trying to figure out what's working at the street level. So good question.
So I think go ahead.
Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was going to say that on this call, visibly, are the five of us, especially you 4, I think, are very good about realizing that you get out of a conference what you put into a conference. And I think that, I've seen all of you 4, moving around a conference, and the amount of energy. People think, oh yeah, you go to a conference and you can hardly wait for 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and then you start drinking, and then you go to bed at 1 or 2 in the morning, and then you get up the next day and do it again. Well, I'm not wired that way. For example, I'm not a big drinker at conferences, because I try not to be, and I also try not to stay up too late, because the sessions oftentimes start at 8, and so I try to figure that I'm there for a reason. And especially people who are sent by their companies as a representative, they are there representing the company, they're representing themselves, and they're trying to get out of it as much as they can. And so if you go to a conference and you're tired by the end of the conference, not from staying out till 2 in the morning drinking, but just because of all the sessions and the meetings, then it was a good conference. So I think that's important to keep in mind as we get into conference season. You get out of it what you put into it.
What if you can do both, Rob?
You're superhuman.
Well, that's like a young buck like you, Kevin, can do that. An old codger like me, if I'm in bed by 10, it's a good conference.
Ooh, that's a little late for me.
I know. I like to be in bed at 9:30. I don't know about you guys, but I like to be in bed.
Christy has you beat. I saw her at 9 o'clock after the president's reception, and she's like, "I'm going to bed." I'm like, "It's 9." She's like, "Yeah." So she's always a good girl.
I always try to do that. But I also think about, you bring like a great point, KP, about how do we share this information out? And are we good about taking the learnings and the knowledge and the nuggets that we get and sharing it back with our teams? You know, it's one of the things that our CEO here has challenged us to do. He's like, hey, if you're at a conference, write it up and then send it out to all of your peers and anybody else that it would impact. And we were really good about that in the fall conference season. Yeah. And then as the season waned, we got, and I'm just going to speak for myself, maybe not as proactive at doing that, and then let an event slide and not send it out. And he reminded us the other day in our executive meeting that this is the expectation of the organization, is that if you are going to a conference, not only are you publicly representing us, but you are to bring back the knowledge that you gain and share it with the organization so that everybody can learn and everybody at the organization gets benefit. That's how you're creating the ROI for going to that conference.
I'll throw in something and kick it over to Robbie. But one thing I've, in really heavily being at trade shows about 12 years or so, you develop relationships, after 5 p.m. With vendor partners. And those vendor partner relationships are an interesting dynamic because you become friends with these people because we're all in this road warrior life, and they all bounce around. They go from vendor to vendor over the years. And what stays consistent is your relationship with those vendor partners. And so oftentimes when they move from one place to another, they're on their second, third, fourth, sometimes even fifth vendor in the time you've known them. They trust you and talk to you and say things to you that maybe their current CEO at their vendor maybe wouldn't want them to say. And they give you the straight skinny. They tell you what's up. They tell you how they're feeling about their MI pricing or how they're feeling about the architecture of their CRM, or they tell you about the things that you need to hear as a lender or potential partner in customer. And so that dynamic is interesting because I feel like, I've built some really strong bonds, as we all have, with our vendor partners, and they give you the straight up, after 5 p.m. talk. Hey, here's where we're lacking, and here's where we're killing it. And so, and then, occasionally you get to have a cigar with Robbie.
Don't say that. Don't say that from my dad.
For Robbie is, you're part of the younger generation. The four of us maybe have been around for a little bit longer. We've been attending a few more conferences. So as you get out there, what are the things that you see at conferences? What are the things that you see about networking, and particularly for anybody who, even if they've been in the business a long time, maybe hasn't been to a bunch of conferences, but they find themselves with time or ability to go. How do you make sure you're getting the most out of it, Robbie?
Well, I've been reluctant to talk because even though I'm in downtown New York, I don't know how my service is. You guys hear me okay? The audio is coming through okay? Okay. Look, I've learned the hard way about fraternizing at conferences or not getting, by fraternizing, I mean carrying on into the night at conferences. There's a sweet spot, and I'll side between KP and Christy. Between 5 p.m. and then maybe to 9 p.m. is a good sweet spot. Nothing great happens after 9:30 or 10 p.m. at the lobby bar at a conference. KP, maybe you beg to differ, but I think you can get in your stuff, in the 4 hours after the sessions, and you don't need to go all night. It just devolves at a certain point. But Christy, to your point, when I first started, I was with my dad, and everyone wants to talk to my dad. He kind of point people toward me because he was tired of talking to people, and I was like, why do I go to conferences? I'm just kind of your bag to deflect attention. But over time, I realized, that network means a lot. Look at my relationship with you. Look at my relationship with KP. Look at my relationship with Brian. That has all been expanded through going to conferences and spending time together face to face. And I think that's invaluable. And then also, the sessions at these various conferences, there are a ton of value. I know everyone's looking forward to being here in New York. Bill Pulte's speaking. John Williams, president of the Fed, is speaking. We get an update from MBA leadership, Bill Kilmer, Mike Fratantoni, those type of guys. There's valuable stuff. The one place I'd push back, and it's an opinion show, so I got to be a little opinionated here, would be I get tired of the same conference crowd going conference to conference to conference to and it's a circuit. KP, please correct me here. What additional value is there when you see the same people every single 3 or 4 weeks at a new place?
Yeah, you have to seek out the different people, and that's these shows are regional, and there's regional differences in companies and vendor partners, and so you kind of have to seek out the difference makers. And I know we're 20 minutes in talking about conferences on the busiest news week, but I just want to say that Rob, you've done a good job because Robbie is an old soul, He is not a partier. I mean, the guy is like, Robbie, your young son, the young buck on this call is like, let's have a cigar. I just want to chill. And he wants to go to a quiet place and have a cigar every now and then and just relax. And he's like, I got to go. I got to be up at, God knows what time to get this freaking blog out in the morning. And he's pretty disciplined about that. And you guys are early birds. But yeah, come on, Brian, take control, man. Let's not talk about conferences for 30 minutes.
No, last thing on conferences, just a challenge to put out for all of the audience and frankly for each of us. So Allie Carty last week did a post and she talked about Dana Abernathy randomly inviting her as a +1 to a conference. And it wasn't like the local conference. It was a, like, you're going to get on a plane and go somewhere. And yesterday at the Michigan Mortgage Lenders event, Lake Michigan Credit Union, their head of their origination business brought a +1, which was a 24-year-old, loan officer in the business for 60 days. And so I would challenge all of us to think about how we can bring a +1 to some of these events and let the next the next generation, if you will, start to get a flavor for what's going on beyond their walls and beyond their home office in most cases. So just a challenge to put out for the audience. But now there was a few bits of news. So KP, what the heck did we miss this week on the economic front?
Well, I'll say what I've always said. I've been reading the Chrisman blog for decades, and the first paragraph and last paragraph are by far the best parts. I mean, of course, you got to read the whole thing. But this is arguably the busiest news week we've had, at least in a quarter. And because of all the tariff craziness and Liberation Day in early April, it was probably more heightened and impactful coming up on a Fed meeting next week. I mean, we're in the heart of Q1 earnings seasons for stocks. And that matters in our business because, we all talk about the flow of money and how it's flowing around. I mean, 40% of the S&P 500 index reported earnings this week. And so, and everyone wants to know how our business is actually impacted by tariffs. And we know that what they put on that stupid poster board the first day was like the shot across the bow. And we're way less worse than that day, right? And so everyone's down to 10% except China, and then there's deals coming. And so everyone, I think generally in the business community and the bond trading community, which they say bond traders are the smartest people on Wall Street, although I think I'll just contend that they don't know everything. That's why they're so itchy on every single data point, because they can't predict the future. But 10-year Treasury's back in a range, and we had a strong jobs report. Wage growth is good. It's outpacing inflation. Inflation was pretty tame. But the fear of what's to come is still out there. It's not as high as it was a month ago. But uncertainty is unsettling in life, but certainly when it comes to trading, treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, which directly impacts our rates, which impacts business, which impacts affordability. And so I will say we talk about a couple themes here, and one is how good the servicers are going to be, at customer acquisition costs and all that. But I gotta do a hat tip to the originators, because, if we're in a $2 trillion year, 1.5 trillion of it is purchase business. The originators are still overwhelmingly getting the new business, and they pivoted so quick and gathered in so many deals in March, and then of course that first week of April. I mean, we see when rates take a quick dip, everyone organizes and mobilizes very quickly on the origination front, and we're all still getting our pipelines out the door. So, hat tip to the originators out there, busting their butts right now. And the trend is your friend. Rates are trending down. They've been trending down. If we have slowing economy, softening labor, and, a Fed poised to cut, when they feel the time is right, not when they're told to do so by the president, that's going to be game on for all of us.
There's definitely the thought out there that if the Fed starts becoming politically influenced, and that credibility in them as an independent institution is threatened, then you could see bond yields actually go up and rates go up because of that loss of confidence. I think the one good thing, KP, actually would be maybe some of this desensitization of uncertainty is to uncertainty is a good thing. It won't be so jittery all the time. Maybe it'll kind of make people a little more calloused when it comes to movements, but maybe I'm naive in thinking that. My dad's kind of
No, I think you're spot on, and not to dominate this segment, but look, President Trump has been backed down, and so he had to back down on his comments against Powell. So the threat of independence is no longer there. He backed down, just like he backed down on the tariffs when he saw the bond market going haywire. So so that's called the Trump put, right? So there's a floor on the market. When it gets too crazy based on what he's saying, he actually recognizes it and backs down. And I don't know if you guys saw, he put out a tweet yesterday on X. He said, anyone that does any business or buys any oil from Iran, you will not do any business with America whatsoever. I mean, China gets all their oil from Iran, right? And so nothing happened in the market. So even his tweets and threats like that, which a month ago would have set the markets in a royal and a tizzy, did nothing yesterday. So your point is 100% made yesterday.
Dad, say something.
I'll turn this car over. It's like when Rob used to tell you, I'm going to turn this car over if you guys don't stop fighting back there.
Maybe he's Dad, you were smirking for what I was saying and what KP was saying. You have a comment there?
No
He did turn. I did actually turn my car over last year. My kids were fighting. They fight on a 10-minute ride to lunch, and on the way back from Vegas, they would not stop fighting. I'd actually pull the car over, and it bought us about 20 minutes of silence, which was totally worth it.
KP, because my dad's not saying much, I wonder about the longer-term lessons from this, because if you look at levels from a month ago until now, sure, there was a ton of volatility. We're back to basically where we were. Not much has changed overall. And so I wonder what it speaks to on a longer-term basis in terms of rate movement, the amount of movement we'll see, and also just kind of the general direction from here. They're saying risks are tilted to the downside, where the chance of economic harm is greater than some economic good coming out at this point. But I'm wondering your thought, if you want to pull out a little crystal ball for this segment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it exactly. I mean, we before all this turmoil and every Fed dot plot, which we're not going to get one next week at the Fed meeting, but we'll get one in June. Higher unemployment rate, slower growth, softening labor, inflation moderating, so disinflation. So that trend is still intact. It 3 weeks of craziness, and now we're back to a normal downtrending market. And I'm not in the recession camp right now. And this is not my forecast that we're in a recession, because we're such a strong consumer. The consumer's strong, and they're spending is up, wage growth is up, unemployment is still full. So I'm not in the recession camp, but the Fed doesn't need to wait for a recession. They can cut. You can look at the 2-year Treasury and they can cut. And I'll add one interesting point just to bring a new dynamic into this. I talk a lot about the middle class not existing in Europe. I mean, either you have property, you don't, and you'll never get in the door. America's trending in that direction. It's very expensive to own a home, and we see under 6.5%. There's a flood of demand, so there's still demand for people to come in across this country to buy houses, and that's a good thing. But what's interesting is in Europe, when they do their CPI version of inflation, they actually do X shelter, so they strip out shelter. They don't even count it, because you can't own a home there, because there's no middle class, and so their inflation is 2.2%. And the European Union has cut 9 times. And so if we strip out shelter here, we're at 1.8%. 1.8%. So, like I've said a lot, the Fed may have to say, we can't do anything about building houses fast enough. We can't do anything about taxes rising or insurance or hurricanes. And so if all the other components are tame on inflation and the 2-year Treasury is at 370, that's room to cut. It's room to cut from the 437 Fed rate we're at right now. So, Trump's not wrong in pressuring Fed Chair Powell. I mean, Bank of China's central bank works in cahoots with Xi over there, and ours is independent, and it's very frustrating. It's frustrating for us, but I'd love to see rates come down, and I think they're going to cut 25 basis points in June.
I would. So one, by the way, that the most interesting session that we had at Texas MBA was the kickoff session with Amanda Johnson, or AJ, where she did talk about, the taxes and insurance and what's impacting those and how that looks for risk from the long-term standpoint. And I think that bleeds into when we think about the rise in insurance cost and the rise in taxes. the consumer can only be optimistic for so long. We're seeing a rise in delinquencies. We're seeing more inventory on the market. We're seeing more consumer debt. And this is a piece of the puzzle that we have to think about. If the Fed doesn't give us some relief, and by us, I mean the average consumer, if they don't get some relief on what are their credit card interest rates, or they don't get relief on what it costs them to buy a car so that they can get to work, if they don't get relief on what their housing payments are, if these things don't happen, we are going to end up in a recession because the consumer can only be so resilient for so long. We don't have a lot of reserves as a country. The average American doesn't have 6 months worth of payments saved up. And so if we don't see some of these things happen, the band is going to get stretched too far and it's going to break.
All right, guys, we're hitting that point. Robbie, your last word before we close it with Rob.
That's good. You're going to hear sirens in the background now because I'm in New York. I wanted to say, for New York, when you come to the conference, see the shade of my hat? We're all wearing suits. It's going to be late May. It's hot. There's a period of the day when the sun, you get no shade from the buildings. It's forever. Do not schedule to walk outside during that time of day. Pick when the sun is tilted behind a building, either in the morning or the evening, and you won't sweat through your suit. That's my last word of advice to everybody.
That's brilliant. Rob, take us home.
Take us home? I could talk for about a half an hour why I disagree.
Talk louder. Talk louder.
Talk louder. Is that better? Oh, well. We're getting
Fight your way
into
through it
hinterlands here. So.
All right, guys. That was the last word, literally.
Sorry.
Safe travels, Rob, wherever you're heading. Looking forward to seeing everybody in the next couple weeks at the different events. And we'll be back here next Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern on The Last Word. See y'all.